This guide is going to take you step by step on how to get every blue magic spell in Final Fantasy V. This will go in mostly linear order, and getting the blue magic spells as early as you can. Some, but not all of the alternatives will be presented. This guide will also go into some of the notable applications for these spells, and as such, there will be some light spoilers. If you're looking for a specific spell, there will be a time-stamped list in the description. One final note, there are several translations for Final Fantasy V. Things may not be exactly the same, especially enemy and blue magic names, so be aware of that while using this guide. I'm using the Super Nintendo version. To learn blue magic, there are 3 requirements. Be a blue mage, or have learning equipped as a secondary, or be a freelancer or mimic with blue mage mastered. Be hit by a blue magic spell, it doesn't matter if it kills you. And finally, whoever was hit by the spell must be alive at the end of the battle. If it kills you, simply resurrect your character before ending the battle. Goblin Punch is very easy to get. Final Fantasy V is linear until you get your first set of jobs. Progress through the game until you beat Wing Raptor and reach the Wind Crystal. After it shatters, simply change your character's jobs to Blue Mage and proceed back down the tower. Black Goblins are a common enemy that will use Goblin Punch regularly. When you enter a battle with one, isolate the Black Goblin and defend until it uses Goblin Punch, and then win the battle. Goblin Punch has some good uses. It uses 0 MP and it has a unique damage formula. You can use it as a way of dealing full melee damage while in the back row, making your party much more durable. This is especially useful in the early game. It also deals 8 times damage if your character is the same level as your target. If you know what level enemies and bosses are, Goblin Punch can be exploited for extreme damage. Aero is first found in exactly the same location as Goblin Punch. Enter a battle with Mold Winds, isolate one, and defend until it uses Aero. It's likely Aero will kill its target at this level. If it does, use a Phoenix down and win the battle to learn Aero. Aero can also be easily learned in the Escape from Karnak Castle from Gigas's. Aero is a moderately strong magic spell when you first get it. It is outclassed by Thunder and Fire Black magic during the first few boss encounters, however. It doesn't have much specific use, but it is a good addition to your arsenal against most enemies as a decent damage spell. After exiting the Wind Shrine and getting control of the pirate ship, make a detour back to the Pirate Cove from the start of the game. Steel Bats are a common enemy here. Defend until they use Drain, which should deal 0 damage, and then win the battle. There are additional ways to learn Drain, but this is by far and wide the easiest and safest. Drain can provide sustain early on, especially if you're foregoing use of a white mage or are lacking potions. Just don't use it against undead enemies as it will heal the enemy and damage you. Otherwise, it's not terribly useful. In Warra's Castle behind the waterfall on the way to the optional boss Shiva, you can find Elf Toads. Isolate an Elf Toad and wait for it to cast Frog Song. It may take a while, as it seems to not use it that often. Elf Toads also appear in Warra's Tower, just before the Water Crystal and the Garula boss fight if you'd rather do that. Frog Song's most immediate and useful application is on Garula. Toading Garula will force him to waste turns untoading itself. If you use a white mage to mute Garula before casting Frog Song, it simply won't be able to untoad itself and will be a frog for the rest of the battle. This trivializes a somewhat difficult encounter for some party setups. Even without mute, you can exploit Frog Song by chain casting it on Garula every time he untoads himself. After getting the Water Crystal jobs and entering the Meteor to transport you to the other continent, you can encounter Knacks in forested areas. They look like packs of wolves. Simply isolate one and do not damage it. Wait for an attack that looks slightly different than a physical attack that should deal 0 damage, and then kill the Knack. Question mark isn't good. It deals damage based around your current HP versus max HP. Goblin Punch is more reliable for physical damage, and other spells are more useful and powerful overall. On the fire ship, you'll encounter enemies called Crew Dust. A man in Karnak tells you that when isolated, they use the Flash ability. Isolate the Crew Dust, and simply wait for it to use Flash, and then kill it. Bosses like Gilgamesh in World 2 will occasionally use Flash, but it's easier to learn it now. Flash blinds the enemy. A few bosses are susceptible to blindness, and when used in conjunction with something like Berserk, it can make some very difficult fights a lot easier, but nothing specific stands out. Exploder is the first blue magic spell that requires a very specific setup. You'll need Black Mage level 1 as a secondary, or a Black Mage with Learning to do this. Black Mage with Learning takes a lot longer to get, so just fight 10 battles with a Black Mage to get the 10 ability points to get it to level 1. On the fire ship, after beating some enemies, occasionally a pair of motor traps will drop down. Have your blue mage with black cast lightning on the motor trap. This will trigger the motor trap to counter with Exploder. If your blue mage doesn't survive, resurrect them with a Phoenix down or a life spell, then kill the final motor trap. In general, Exploder is not a useful spell. Killing yourself to deal damage is usually not good. It does have one good application. Azomagia is a boss in the end zone, and he happens to be a blue mage. Having your blue mages use Exploder on him will teach it to him, and he will almost always immediately counter by using it himself. This provides an easy victory, but likely 2 dead party members. You can also use it in the scripted sequence between Exdeath and Galoof to stop the sequence prematurely. After the fire ship, you'll be forced to escape Karnak Castle. It's strongly suggested after the fire crystal explodes to change everyone to blue mages, and maybe 1 thief for faster escaping from battles and to sprint. Do this before you enter Karnak Castle. Immediately save when you're given the chance, as the next 2 spells can be a bit of a time crunch. You should have at least 9.5 minutes on your save. Most treasure chests in this area are trapped by monsters. A few have Gigases in them. Gigases will commonly use Aero, which you should already have, but it's another opportunity to learn it. They will also uncommonly use Aero 2, which is a much more powerful version. During the escape from Karnak, you'll want to pick up the Elf Cape, the Ribbon, the Guardian Knife, and the spell Esuna, most of which will have a Gigas in the monster box. This gives you multiple attempts of getting Aero and Aero 2. General advice for the escape from Karnak: skip the elixir chests, and don't wait too long for Aero 2 to go off before moving on to the next Gigas. Also, use a map of Karnak Castle if you're unfamiliar with the locations of chests, and if you need to check, you can pause during a battle. There will be other opportunities to learn Aero 2, like in the Floating Ruins, but Gigases use it regularly and are a reliable way to learn it. Aero 2 is the second tier of Aero. Some enemies are weak versus wind attacks, but it doesn't have many extremely powerful uses. It's a good general purpose magic spell. Still during the escape from Karnak, once you try and leave the castle, you'll enter a mandatory battle versus 3 wolves and a sergeant. Kill the 3 wolves, and wait for the sergeant to transform into Ironclaw. Ironclaw will use Deathclaw occasionally. Deathclaw puts a character into single-digit hit points and paralyzes them. If the person who got hit with Deathclaw is killed, make sure to resurrect them before ending the battle. Then make sure to actually leave Karnak Castle before the 10 minutes are up. If you're slow and fail to learn Deathclaw, you can reset and try again, or you can get it later from the basement of Galoof's castle once you enter his world. Gilgamesh will also use it occasionally in your battles with him. Deathclaw can be used on some bosses, most notably as Byblos in the Ancient Library. A successful Deathclaw will put him into an inch of his life, and any physical attack will take him out. Not a super powerful use, as you have access to Ifrit at this point, but it's still fun. Another boss that's vulnerable to Deathclaw is the Dragon Pod in World 2. Simply land a Deathclaw, then hit it and the small flowers with an AoE spell to win the battle. After escaping Karnak Castle, you'll have unlocked Beastmaster, Mediator, or Orator, depending on your translation. A few blue magic spells do require use of the control ability, or other much more unreliable methods. It's strongly recommended after the escape from Karnak Castle to grind the 60 ability points to master the control ability on your characters, or otherwise to return to these later once you have control. To get Missile early, it requires the control ability. Enter the fire ship with a blue mage and anyone equipped with control. Win a battle and have 2 motor traps show up. Use control and use Missile on your blue mage, then win the battle. Missile is also commonly used in the Soul Cannon boss fight, so that's another great opportunity to learn it. In the 3rd battle with Gilgamesh, he uses a few blue magic spells, including Deathclaw and Missile, so it's another opportunity to learn them there as well. Missile is a gravity spell that does percentage-based damage. Most enemies are immune to it, and there are more reliable ways to deal damage. A lot of bosses are susceptible to gravity spells, like the Dragon Pod, but often there are other, better ways to defeat them. Fusion requires the control ability. In the forest outside the Ancient Library, you can encounter Mithril Dragons. Use the control ability, and have the Mithril Dragon use Fusion on your blue mage. If it's a single Mithril Dragon, the battle is over. Otherwise, defeat the remaining enemies. Fusion is like the inverse of Exploder, where instead of dealing damage and killing your character, it heals a target and kills your character. It's not useful, as you're no doubt always better off just throwing an item rather than killing one of your party members to heal another, but it's blue magic. It can't all be good. There are 4 blue magic spells in the Ancient Library, but level 5 Doom requires the most preparation. It kills anyone and everyone whose level is evenly divisible by 5. This is a problem, as likely your entire party is the same level at this point. This is where you have to choose a patsy, or an unintentional hero, depending on how things turn out. When one of your party members is a level divisible by 5, which at the Ancient Library will likely be around level 15 with minimal grinding, or 20 if you grinded a lot for control, you need to kill them off to prevent them from gaining further EXP. Let the rest of the party gain 1 level, so you have 3 level 16s and 1 level 15, for example. This will also work with 1 level 19 and 3 level 20s, which is what I had, but the other way is better and safer. Change your level 5 divisible characters to Blue Mage, or equip Learning and enter a battle with Page 64, who looks like a blue demon head. Wait for it to use level 5 Doom, and then realize you've made a huge mistake making your 1 level 19 character a white mage. The most important step here is to resurrect your blue mage and make sure they stay alive when you defeat page 64 to learn level 5 Doom. Page 64s have a tendency to use level 5 death a second and third time after you've tried to resurrect your party, which is why it's better to have a single patsy. This spell is where blue mage starts to get really ridiculous. You can use it to grind statues in the Castle Bow basement in World 2 for quick and easy ability points. You'll get 4 to 8 ability points and a good amount of gil per battle with a single casting of level 5 Doom. It has a very close save point for easy MP restores, and it's easily one of the most efficient places to grind ability points in the game. It's recommended to give blue to a thief or ninja to ensure they are first to get a turn and to set your cursor to memory for easy access to level 5 Doom. Then you can swap whichever character is the level 5 Doom caster as others run out of MP to maximize grinding efficiency and minimize inn or cabin usage. If you progress further in World 2, you can use level 5 Doom to grind levels in the forest outside of Moor. It provides 825 EXP per battle, 3 ability points, and a decent amount of gil. This is a very good way to pick up the tier 3 magic that becomes available in Moor, or to tune up your characters for upcoming events. You can use level 5 Doom on several bosses, including Adamantoise, the side launchers on the Soul Cannon, and the second form of Archeoavis. It can also be exploited further by combining it with other blue magic, like Dark Shock and level 2 Old to beat some others. Guard Off and Moon Flute are learned from the same enemy in the Ancient Library. Guard Off requires the control ability. Enter a battle with page 256, who looks like a tiki mask. Use control on page 256 to learn Guard Off. Then attack it once to break the control, and wait for it to cast Moon Flute. Moon Flute will berserk your entire party, which will hopefully result in a win. It's recommended to have at least one party member who is a strong physical attacker going into the fight with page 256. Guard Off can also be learned easily from Ziggurats in the Barrier Tower and Magic Dragons in Exdeath's Castle. Guard Off halves enemy defenses. If you're using a melee-oriented team, this is a great spell. It's useful on a surprising amount of bosses. Berserk can be an effective tool against certain enemies. Moon Flute berserks your party, which is generally not a good thing. Get it for completion rather than to use it. At the bottom of the Ancient Library, you'll fight Byblos. Byblos uses Magic Hammer fairly regularly. Turn your party into blue mages or other jobs with learning and wait for it to land because it is a single target spell. Then defeat Byblos and make sure the character hit by Byblos' Magic Hammer lives. Magic Hammer can also be learned in World 2 from Drippies in the Wyvern Mountain, but it's easier to just learn it from Byblos. Magic Hammer halves the target's MP. There are some uses for it, mainly by running a handful of bosses out of MP. It can be used on bosses like Melusion, who has a low MP pool and uses tier 3 magic. That being said, anytime Magic Hammer might be useful, it's usually easier to use a different strategy instead of trying to run your opponents out of MP. There are circumstances where it is a very viable option, however. You can technically learn Aqua Rake earlier than the previous blue magic on the list, but Dorm Chimeras are extremely deadly at lower level. It's recommended to be at least level 16 plus before attempting to learn Aqua Rake. In the linear path between Karnak and the Ancient Library, there is a section of desert. In the desert, you will encounter Dorm Chimeras who will use Aqua Rake. A good strategy is to have blue mages in the back row with control. After being hit with Aqua Rake, control the Chimera and have it use Aqua Rake on itself until it's out of MP. Then finish it off with spells like Aero 2, which won't break the control. Aqua Rake is extremely powerful. It hits everything and is just a good tool for clearing out random encounters. It is extremely effective against monsters in the desert, including the Sandworm boss, which can be a hassle otherwise. Aqua Rake will kill it in a single hit, making an annoying encounter a total joke. This also extends to the trek to the Moogle Forest, as you can ignore the path shown and just Aqua Rake your way through the desert. The only downside to it is that it uses a lot of MP, but it remains useful for the entirety of World 1 and most of World 2. After getting the steamship, you'll want to head southeast to Crescent Island. After entering the town, you'll lose the ship as part of standard story progression. Exit the town and get the Black Chocobo from the forest. Go south to another island and enter random battles here. You're looking for enemies called Black Flames. They will use Dark Shock. After being hit with Dark Shock, kill them in one turn with Aqua Rake and win the battle. Level adjustment is extremely powerful in Final Fantasy V. A lot of attacks factor in your level and the enemy's level, so by dropping enemy's level by half, you have a much better chance of dealing damage or successfully landing attacks. A surprising number of bosses are vulnerable to Dark Shock. It may not land immediately, but it is worth trying. One of the best abuses of Dark Shock is against Atmos on the Barrier Tower. Connect to Dark Shock, and its level will drop from 41 to 20 as it rounds down. and then you can kill it with level 5 Doom. This may only work on the Super Nintendo version. I believe he gains the heavy tag in other versions, making him immune to instant death attacks. You'll have to double check if it's a viable strategy for your version. Once you get the airship, you're tasked with taking out the flying fortress. You'll have to fight 4 sets of 2 cannons. The flame cannons appear regularly and they use Emission constantly. Simply use a blue mage and take them out, making sure they live through the battle. You can also abuse saving to ensure flame cannons show up by reloading if you didn't get one. Emission doesn't have many uses. It's a fire elemental spell, but it's not really anything noteworthy otherwise. Aero 2 is generally more useful and more powerful, as is Aqua Rake. White Wind requires control. In the floating ruins after beating the soul cannon, you'll encounter enemies called whirl demons. These can be controlled to cast White Wind on your party, then just kill them off. These enemies also commonly use Aero 2 if you missed it from the Gigases in the escape from Karnak Castle. White Wind is a spell that heals your whole party based around the user's current HP. Obviously, it adds a lot of utility to the blue magic skill set, especially when it's used as a secondary ability. It's great to have, and is always useful as an alternative to white magic. It also bypasses the bone mail and lets you heal through the undead effect, making it a much more viable piece of equipment. If you're low on HP, it can be really bad, but that's the trade-off of blue magic. Still in the floating ruins, you'll occasionally encounter Lamia. When you do, isolate it if it came with other enemies. They seem reluctant to use Blowfish, so make sure you have someone with control. It's unlikely the target survives at this point in the game, so make sure to resurrect them before ending the battle. Blowfish, or 1,000 Needles, is a great general purpose spell. It just deals 1,000 damage for 25 MP. It's immediately useful just for random battles, and it destroys Archeoavis' first form. Archeoavis is an annoying fight as he has high physical defense and rotates his magic resistance. Obviously, Blowfish just does 1,000 damage regardless of defenses, so it bypasses the entire gimmick of that fight. Finish it off with level 5 Doom when it comes back to life. Blowfish will also demolish the remaining bosses of World 1, Titan and Chimera Brain. Eventually, other spells will surpass it, but it remains useful throughout the early stages of World 2 as well. It's just 1,000 damage. You can't really go wrong. Level 4 Graviga, much like level 5 Doom, requires preparation. This spell is still in the floating ruins, but at the very final floor with King Tycoon and the Archeoavis. Hopefully by the time you get here, you have someone who's level 20, otherwise you'll have to grind to a level divisible by 4, 16, 20, 24, 28, 32, etc. This is also one of the most confusing blue magics to learn. Level 4 Graviga is a final attack from a Ghidra. These are not to be confused with Hydras. Depending on your version of the game, you may have Hydras and Hudras, which make things really confusing. They look identical, barring coloration. You'll know you're against Ghidras because it will use attacks like Poison Breath. These enemies are undead, so you can quickly end the battle by throwing a Phoenix down or by using the life spell. This should trigger level 4 Graviga as a final attack, but it will never kill your blue mage as it is a percentage-based attack and end the battle. Gravity spells are useful against a surprising amount of enemies in Final Fantasy V. The level divisible by 4 stipulation makes it much more specific and therefore rarely useful. Any enemies vulnerable to gravity are more likely to be viable targets of Missile rather than level 4 Graviga. The next blue magic spell, Time Slip, is not available until the Barrier Tower in Gloof's world. In the first area before the save point, get into a random battle until you encounter a Traveler. Isolate it, and wait for it to use Time Slip on someone with learning, and end the battle. Travelers also commonly appear with Neons, who often use Flash, making this another opportunity to learn that as well. Time Slip casts Old in Sleep. Not much useful for it, unfortunately. After the Barrier Tower in Sage Guido's cave, you can encounter enemies called Metamorphos. They will occasionally change into a monster that looks like a Whirl Demon, who will use Aero 3 on a single target. As such, equip Learning on everyone to hedge your bets. It's the third tier of Aero. It's stronger than Blowfish and surpasses Aqua Rake against most things, while being more MP efficient. It also gets a power bonus when you're equipped with the Air Knife, making it very effective, especially when using blue as a secondary on something like a Black Mage. It's very useful against bosses like Omniscient and general random battles in Worlds 2 and 3. After Sage Guido's cave, your next destination is Moor. In Moor Forest, you can encounter tiny mages. They will occasionally use this spell against your party. It's single target, hedge your bets by making everyone capable of learning. Gilgamesh in Exdeath's Castle also has a tendency to use it fairly often. Sadly, very few enemies are weak versus tiny, and any that are usually susceptible to things like instant death and break, making this not very useful. Level 2 Old is by far the easiest spell of the level X, Y spells to learn. If your characters are an even level, they can learn it. If not, just gain a level and you should be good to go. Level 2 ult is casted by magic dragons in the lower floors of Exdeath's castle. Simply get hit by it, and win the battle with your blue mages surviving. Magic dragons will also cast Aero 3 and guard off regularly, making it a good chance to learn these as well. Level 2 ult has the ability to bypass old immune enemies. The first useful application is, oddly enough, still in Exdeath's castle against Exdeath himself. Exdeath is level 66, and as such, you can hit him with level 2 ult. Ult slowly reduces an enemy's speed and level. It's more useful to forget level 2 ult in this circumstance, and just go for the next blue magic on this list instead. Level 3 flare requires some very specific preparation. My party was level 30, with 1 level 29. A single level brought everyone to 31, and 1 level 30 patsy to be the target of level 3 flare. I've read that this method requires the character with learnings level to be divisible by 2, so 30 would apply to both 2 and 3, as well as 24 and 36. You'll need to do some very specific setups. A level 30 or another level divisible by 3 blue mage or someone with learning, someone capable of using control, a white mage or someone else capable of casting reflect. It's recommended to do this in Exdeath's castle after the first sacred circle because you can easily save, restore your party, and it makes a good grinding location if you're somehow not within the divisible by 3 level range. You'll want to enter a battle with a single red dragon, control it, and then cast reflect on it. Use level 3 flare on itself, which will be reflected onto your party, and hopefully onto someone with learning. Level 3 flare will likely kill your character, resurrect them, and end the battle with spells like Aero 3 to not break control on the red dragon. They say in nature, the cure is near the poison. In the battle with Exdeath in his castle, he's level 66, which means he's susceptible to level 3 flare. Using it on him with all your characters will kill him before he has much of a chance to do anything. Level 3 flare can also be used against the gargoyles in the merged world who defend the tablets. The gargoyles must be killed at the same time or they'll resurrect each other, and conveniently, they're both level 33, which means they're a prime target for level 3 flare. The easiest way to get Condemn is the battle with Exdeath in his castle. He will always start off by condemning a character. The easiest way to learn it is hedge your bets. Either have everyone be blue mages, or freelancer with mastered blue mage to ensure he hits someone capable of learning Condemn. There are several strategies for Exdeath, but it's a great opportunity to test out level 3 flare, and since your blue mage is any way to learn Condemn, it's readily available. You should be able to kill him before Condemn kills your character by spamming level 3 flare. If the condemned person dies, just resurrect them and ensure they live through the battle. Unfortunately, Condemn isn't terribly useful. Anything susceptible to death is often vulnerable to instant death and things like break. Oddly enough, you can return the favor and use it on the back part of Neo Exdeath for an easy kill on it. The first location to get Mind Blast is in the Merged World, the boss of the Island Shrine. Mind Blast inflicts Paralyze, so it's worth doing some preparation. You can negate Paralyze with Hermes Sandals. It's worth stopping by the Phantom Village to pick up 4 pairs just because they're insanely strong accessories, but it will cost you 50,000 gil apiece. This fight is incredibly annoying, but he uses Mind Blast pretty regularly. It's single target, hedge your bets, and make everyone capable of learning. Freelancer with Master Blue Mage is a great choice here. Otherwise, get hit by it, and finish one of the longest and most annoying battles in the game. You get Mind Blast so late in the game that there's not a whole lot left. The 2 or 3 remaining blue magic spells in World 3 are just not really worth using, unfortunately. Roulette is probably the most involved blue magic to get in terms of optional content. In the Merged World, at the very bottom, there is a forest where you'll enter a random battle, except it's not a battle, it's actually a town. Go through the maze-like town. Having a thief helps to see the hidden passages, and find the Black Chocobo. Talk to it, and you'll exit the town. The Black Chocobo is the only way to get to the Phoenix Tower and the North Mountain for Bahamut. Fly the Black Chocobo north, and land in the forest by the desert, and go south until you reach the tower. Turn all your characters to blue mages, and get in a random battle in the Phoenix Tower until you encounter a Belladonna. Isolate it, and wait for it to use Roulette. Resurrect the party member it killed, as it's 4-1 in your favor that it will kill your guy and not her. Of course, if you want to skip the Phoenix Tower, enemies in the second area of the end zone called Death Dealers use Roulette as well, so you can skip the whole Phoenix Tower thing altogether. It's not worth the risk of killing your own party members to possibly instant KO an enemy, especially since there are always better alternatives. Big Guard requires control. It also requires a rare encounter with an enemy called Stingray in this specific area of water near the Phoenix Tower. This means you need a boat, which means you'll have to have progressed through the game until you've beaten the Forked Tower and rescue Sid, who will modify your airship to be a boat and a submarine. Turn your characters to blue mages with control, or freelancer with mastered blue mage and control. Fight all the random battles that come your way until you get into a battle with Stingray. Control Stingray and get it to use Big Guard on your party, then defeat it. Stingray is level 93, which means it's susceptible to level 3 Flare, but you should have access to extremely strong equipment and spells at this point, so do whatever you like. This is an alleged very rare encounter, but all in, it took 9 minutes from landing to getting Big Guard and leaving. The time required might vary as it's approximately a 6% encounter rate. Protect Shell and Float on your entire party. It's useful for literally every single remaining encounter in the game. It's unfortunate you can't get it until World 3. If it was available earlier, it would make Blue Mage even more disgustingly broken because of how good this spell is. Notable encounters are against Catastrophe, who will continually pull your party down from Float in an attempt to use Earthshaker. Big Guard is a nice alternative to Float, and it can be easily spammed to force Gravity 100s. Otherwise, use it on your first turn in every battle in the end zone. That's it. A beautiful, perfect, completed list of all the blue magic in Final Fantasy V is at your disposal.